What's up, everybody? How's it going? Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Should we pass the mic around? Happy Friday. Happy to have Jee and Chris Tabb here in Salt Lake City, of all places.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll say it's quite beautiful here. Very pleased.
It is, yeah. So I'm Jee. This is Joe Reese.
I'm Joe Reese
over here. So yeah, welcome to the show today. So yeah, we thought we'd spontaneously do. We sometimes do a TGIF Friday. That's actually where we met Chris Tabb one random Friday afternoon. He gate crashed our show. So,
I believe he was trolling us on LinkedIn.
yeah, it was maybe a little tad of trolling, but yeah, we've overcome that. We're friends now.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, so I think we were talking about some topics that we want to cover today. I think the one thing we'd like to talk about is data career advice for economic downturns, and so it shouldn't be news to anybody who's watching this, but things are changing in the markets right now and the economy, and so I think people have questions for us about how to navigate those waters. So yeah, I mean, what's your take right now? What's your kind of feel of the whole economic landscape right now and how it relates to data in particular?
Well, I think there's a bit of a rebalance at the moment. So we've all seen these very high valuations of companies, and they're all based on revenue they're bringing in, and there's very high multipliers, which I think there's a bit of a reality check now. I think we're in that post-COVID era now, and the companies are looking to see where they invest their money. And it's not always data now, so it's other things. So yeah, we're interested to see how many of these companies that are like pre-IPO have got enough to keep them going. So yeah, make sure if you join a company, make sure it's got good funding. Top tip.
So I actually have a question. So outside looking in, I mean, you're not based in the U.S., correct?
No, I'm not.
I mean, what are people in Europe saying about the U.S. and like the financial condition there? I mean, we have our own internal take, but
so I think it's. I haven't. Not many people talk about it too much yet. I mean, it's recent events in the past couple of weeks, but up until then, it's getting people to hire people. It's really hard. It's a very much a high demand for data engineers or data professionals. So it hasn't hit yet, I think. But I think there's some of the we've seen recently some companies start to lay off people. So
in the UK,
well, yeah, UK, yeah,
interesting.
So yeah, it'll be interesting. I think that the market's still buoyant enough that those people can be absorbed, and there's they won't have to. Maybe not getting the very high salaries that were being battered around before, but there's still plenty of work out there, and I think that's reassuring, and people don't have to worry. They have to go and retrain to become doctors or something now rather than data professionals.
my parents would love that.
I'm looking at retraining.
Your parents want you to be a doctor?
Both of them are doctors. Both my grandfathers are doctors. Both my parents are doctors. Both my grandparents, grandfathers, and then their grandfathers. So
okay,
I was
Dr. Data.
a disappointment. I was kidding.
I mean, I'm the wrong kind of doctor, but my parents were not doctors, fortunately.
You have a title doctor, though. I'm surprised you don't call yourself doctor on LinkedIn, like Dr.
Exactly.
Matt Housley.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think it's interesting, though. I mean, as far as my cognizance goes of economic downturns, I've kind of seen three big ones. There were others in my lifetime, but there was the big, internet collapse, the first era of the internet, like right around 2000 or so. And that one was interesting because, like, who's around from back in those days? Amazon, like they're totally kicking butt still. But for the most part, the internet was just kind of getting started, and then it collapsed like almost immediately. You were just a few years into these internet companies, and the job market was completely terrible. And then all of a sudden it started to come back in the early 2000s.
I remember
Google
that.
and other companies. Yeah. So it didn't take long, like really big tech collapse, but then it came back pretty quick. What was the next one? So real estate crisis, 2006, 7. And the interesting thing about that one is the tech did just fine. I mean, you had the iPhone launching into that era, like web apps, like just an explosion in tech, even though we were in the Great Recession for many, many years. And then the COVID crisis itself was like this very temporary economic blip. And that one was interesting for data people because data demand actually went up quite a bit because all these companies were just trying to figure out an economy that they could no longer understand. It's like, well, we need more data. We need to understand who our new customers are. They saw this huge, in some cases, huge boost in consumption. Other companies saw a big shift in the demographic of their consumers. And so the question is if we go into big economic displacement this time, is it going to be like that? Are companies going to want more data to understand economic shift? Or is there just going to be a huge cut in employment? Wages, how are wages going to shift?
I think
I don't
it depends
know
on
right
how viable
now.
the company is.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
I
that's
think it's
true.
The first part, it's like if you can keep people around and afford to pay them, then I guess you can live to fight another day with data. But if you can't do that, then you're not an ongoing concern. So.
Yeah, I also think it was consolidation of the market as well. So, the data, before the big four players, Oracle, IBM, SAP, Microsoft, and this recent, with the big data and then the recent modern data cloud or modern stack, has meant there's been loads more players now. And I think there'll be consolidation. I think, okay, right, which are the good ones? Which are the ones that actually got the right vision, the right product roadmap, good product that actually works as well. So I think there's still a demand out there, but I think there'll be some companies will fare well out of it, some companies won't. So I mean, go back to this about advice for a career is do the research on the company that you're looking to work with. Look at their roadmap, look at their vision, look at their revenue. That'll be a good indicators if it's a company worth joining and it's going to ride this out.
Anything you want to add, Ken?
Yeah, probably have some thoughts here.
Yeah, I mean, I talk to a lot of people who are more sort of on the entry level, and I'm sure they're worried about, is there an opportunity for me if companies aren't hiring as much? And I think on the entry level, there is probably going to be more competitiveness, more of a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
But on the flip side, for more experienced data scientists, I think that there's a tremendous amount of opportunities. I mean, there are quite a few large tech companies that still cannot hire talent quickly enough. One reason is because a lot of people are leaving some of those companies based on other factors. But if you look at the number of people that some of these large companies employ, I mean, that has substantial weight in the market. And that also isn't to say that people on the entry level are going to be completely placed out. I think something we're going to talk about in a little bit is what are marketable skills that could create value for some of these companies. And part of that is doing homework and understanding some of the trends in the market, tuning into different shows, different conversations, and really listening about, what direction is this going? How do I get in front of those skills, and to continue to perpetuate them?
Yeah, I completely agreed. I actually have a question here. Let me see here. Laura asks, is it safe to assume that medical or tech companies have good funding? I'll give you a nuanced answer to this, like other people's perspective, because I think I would say that a lot of companies have had good funding. That's different from saying that they will have good funding going forward. This is really the multi-trillion-dollar question in the markets is what happens as rates rise and the ability of companies to receive funding. It's what I think is going to happen is, and by tech companies and medical companies, I think you'd also have to distinguish between companies that are a bit more mature versus startup and early stage, or pre-IPO, or even early, they've IPO'd recently and probably aren't profitable, right? So it really depends on a lot of factors. Or if they are profitable, that's probably a thing I would be looking at right now. Like as Chris pointed out, study the companies, and other people point out, study the companies, make sure that they're viable. I think that's more important than ever. The days of assuming that a company is a great fit to work at because they've received a bunch of funding, that goes out the window right now. Like that's, I think the amount of funding you raise is completely irrelevant. It's how well you can execute as a company. I would say gasp, maybe making profits, and these strange metrics that I think were kind of thrown to the wayside for the last, over 10 years in this last cycle. So, funding. So funding, I would say, just because companies have raised funding is not a good metric to say that you should join them. So it's their ability to raise the next fund and not experience a down round.
Yeah, and that's a tricky prospect right now. I mean, I think many companies will be looking to sell at just a reasonable price, not an outrageously high valuation anymore. I think another thing that's likely is that your big FANG companies, their market cap is probably just going to go down somewhat if there's a shift in the stock market, but they'll still potentially be a good place to work, right? They're not going to be posting record profits all the time for a while if there's a downturn, but they're going to be a core part of the economy. And so they'll still be a solid option as an employer, even if you're not getting paid quite as much as you would have expected in a pay band like 2 years ago. I don't know.
It's a little fortuitous. I sat next to someone on the airplane on the way down here who I think he works at a hedge fund and is specifically in the medical domain.
Ooh.
And we're talking about, large scale, big companies in medicine. And at least in the US, a lot of them are funded either by the public sector, and their focus is fixing inefficiencies in the US medical market. And it's very inefficient, especially during the pandemic and these types of things. So it's very nuanced with each individual company. But I think that there's probably going to be plenty of funding, especially if it's coming from the government in that specific area for the foreseeable future. Do I think there will necessarily be innovation in that area? No. But there's, to me, that is one of the more stable areas just because of the fact that public sector is so involved, and there's also infinite problems to solve within that space.
I think companies will start to probably look, if they're going to save money, it's looking at more automation, more optimization, working smarter, not harder. So I think because of this, the boom in data, or the focus on data, like many of the C-level or the top level, they think just throwing more data people, it solves the problem. So, okay, I'm going to hire 4 data scientists. Have they got access to the data they need? Probably not. They're probably going to get the most bang for your buck out of them? Definitely not. So, yeah, I think companies, the downturn may people reevaluate how they spend and how they resource, and working looking at more automation, looking at more metadata driven approaches. Does that mean that there's going to be a shortage of jobs for data people? No, it just means you're going to be using the skills in maybe a different way, more business focused. I think recently, if everyone's being too tech focused, create a new framework, does it add business value? I think it's going to be a swap around again. Why are we doing this? What business value does it give us? Yeah, let's buy it, let's build it, rather than let's build it and see what happens. So I think it's people a bit more clever with how they use their data teams now.
I'll say something else. Joe and I talk a lot about data, specifically in the context of cloud. And Ken, you may have some thoughts about this as well, about how cloud affects data science and machine learning and such. But I think we'll see two kind of contradictory effects with cloud spending. So on the one hand, I suspect that a lot of companies that have really expensive on-prem data systems are going to look to cut those. They'll see another contract coming down the road and they'll basically say, nope, we're not signing that multi-million-dollar database contract, so figure out how to do it some other way. So you'll see a lot of potentially cloud migrations driven by that. On the other hand, CFOs are going to be putting a lot of downward pressure on cloud spend to say, all right, we've migrated to the cloud, but figure out how to do it with less.
FinOps.
You got to cut. Yeah, FinOps.
For sure.
Cut back, spend less, whatever you have to do.
I think it's number 9.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yes, this will all be coming on the book soon. But yeah, and Ken, I'll be curious to get your thoughts on this too.
I need to collect my thoughts.
Okay, that's
Okay.
fine. Joe, you may have.
The FinOps thing. I'll carry on a bit. I think the world of the Capex world a while ago, where you had to go and pre-plan, get justification for it, go to the board and say I won that £500,000 or something, and you had to have a good watertight case of why you go and get it. What's happened now with the pay-as-you-go approaches, there wasn't that monitoring in place, and it was, people took their eye off it because it's just OPEX expenditure. But that OPEX is going up so much now. I think now we need to look at how we do that more efficiently. And, looking at having a recharge capability that the people in your company that are using that facility, they're being charged for it, rather than it being a central bucket of cash that everyone just goes and draws down on it. And very hard to recharge that, very hard to justify getting that size of OPEX the year after as well, because if you don't know where it's been spent or how can justify the value you've got out of it, you're not going to get that budget again.
Well, I think it also depends on how the company measures its success. So, I think if you're an EBITDA-driven company, for example, so that's earnings for interest, depreciation, taxes, amortization. So, but that's a metric that a lot of companies use to describe operating earnings. Charlie Munger also calls it bullshit earnings, but that's a different topic. So if you have an EBITDA-driven focus, we actually saw this with one company where they actually wanted to buy on-prem because they could depreciate the amount and make their expenses look lower. Whereas if they had OpEx, it actually made their expenses higher. And so it was a gaming of the system approach. I didn't agree that it was, but it was at the expense of innovating and being flexible with your technology. And it's like, so you're doing some dumb accounting trick, and you're basically kneecapping your ability to be flexible with your ability to respond to and innovate. And that to me was like kind of lunacy. But that's how, as Charlie Munger always says, show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. And I think that's also, I think, what's going to drive whether or not companies embrace the cloud, and not just that, but how they embrace it. But in general, I think the theme is the days of gratuitous spending on whether it's cloud spend, on-prem servers, kombucha on top, like all that shit is definitely going to get checked real quick. So,
yeah, I mean, again, I think that there's a lot of nuance around cloud spend. So like cloud spend in theory can run away, right? And individual companies have to determine what is their like largest proportion of cloud spend related to. So if it's, you're like fairly advanced and you're spending a lot of time and money training models on the cloud, it might actually be worth it to bring stuff on-prem and do some sort of hybrid solution where you're deploying completely on cloud, obviously, and training models or prototyping models off the cloud, because that's a fixed cost to the company for the most part, aside from like electricity, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think that there really isn't going to be a one size fits all approach or one like unilateral direction. I think that it's really important for companies to realize that specific to your unique problem set, you really have to have some sort of unique solution based on the proportion of cloud, proportion in-house, or whatever that might be. And I think it's so easy for leadership in a lot of tech companies or any company for that matter to just say, hey, like there's one specific thing we have to do. There's this binary decision. We have to go more towards the cloud. We have to bring everything on-prem. And I don't know. I just think it's very worthwhile to have that conversation with your team because it could probably save you a tremendous amount of money.
For sure.
To be deliberate about this, and maybe that's the problem that we see far too often, is that companies are either taking a momentum-based approach, like, well, we've had these systems for the last 20 years, why would we ever change? Or it's like the thoughtlessly dive into the cloud without really having a plan. Yeah. It's like, well, it's not quite what we're advocating for here. Yeah. But I would say, like, in terms of skill sets, like acquiring cloud skills for data engineers, that's still going to be a good investment of your time. And it doesn't mean that everything you do will be in the cloud, but it does mean that where there are migration opportunities, you'll be able to participate in those. There's going to be demand for those skills. And you probably have similar specifics on data science.
Well, exactly. And I think that that's sort of the beauty of it is I'm coming probably from a more data science centric perspective.
Exactly.
And like from a pure data engineering perspective, I think the cloud is like arguably more integral in that process. Right. And I think that that's also something that we should be considering. I would again argue that most companies are in more desperate need of data engineering, and it's probably not even an argument. It's probably the truth at this point.
We like that so much. We started a company around it.
Exactly, right. And so to me, that's probably the first thought you should be having. So yeah.
And I'm curious about your thoughts. I mean, what I've sometimes told people is that if you're having trouble getting a data science job, maybe start in data engineering and acquire those skills. And if you get really good at that, it can be a foundation. But obviously,
how do you start in data engineering though? It's just like
tough.
We get asked this all the time. Yeah. It's like, how do I become a data engineer? I'm like, I don't know. That's tough. There might be a book on this at some point, but gratuitous, self-shilling beside it's a tough one. Like it's not there. I would say there's more of a well-trodden path to become an analyst or data scientist versus a data engineer. Like that's sort of a bit new. So yeah.
And I mean the nice thing now is that to learn these tools in the cloud, anyone can basically access them. You can spin up Snowflake and spend like $5 a month. You got to be careful. Let me make that clear. You can easily spend hundreds of bucks a month if you're not careful. Be careful. But you can go use actual production systems to learn on. Same thing, learning BigQuery or Redshift or any of these systems. You can learn them very cheaply, which wasn't the case 20 years ago, where you had to have access to like this really expensive production system. And it was very hard to get this experience without already being in a company. And so building those skills is very, very valuable, but you still have this chicken and egg problem where everyone wants to hire a data engineer who has 10 years of experience already, and they don't want to give new talent a chance.
Even though the title's been around for like not that long.
I mean, exactly. I mean, I totally agree with the data engineering is probably the entry level you should try and get to if you want to become a data scientist, and any of the skills you learn there will be foundational and be usable. Not transferable. And what we've been working recently, we've been expanding, we're growing our own engineers, and we've talked about this before. As there's a shortage out there, what you need to do is you need to find the right core skills or minerals, and then build on that. And we've been quite successful with that. If you've got the good foundational stuff, read good books, watch good shows. You can find a consultancy company that's up for taking a chance and getting someone in and training them up. And
like leading edge IT.
Like leading edge IT, lead data. And we've got a good mentoring program in there, and it works very well. So yeah, there are opportunities out there. I think you just need to look in the right places. You're probably not going to get a job as a data engineer first time out of FANG or a large organization like that, but start off with a consultancy company and never leave because you love it so much.
Well, I think that there's fairly clear paths into similar roles, right? So you have data analyst and you have software engineer in some sense, right? And if you're a software engineer and you're picking up relevant data engineering skills, you have at least some relevant experience in industry, and you're showcasing that you have something that's very useful to data engineering, which is like the coding programming skill set. And so to make a transition from software engineering, I think it's a lot easier than just starting from scratch and going in, right? Yeah. And so to me, it's all about building out like your specialty, right? Everyone is going to love someone that has a data engineering experience but can write unbelievably good code, right? Like that is always going to be valued. From the other side, I mean, a lot of data analysts, if you're depending on the company you're at, you could be doing a lot of data engineering work, right? And in the positions you're at in specific companies, you also have generally a reasonable amount of control over what you do. You can at least ask to be part of certain projects and get those on your resume. To me, that is something that a lot of people forget, is they're like, oh, I have to be in this role immediately. I want to start it now. And the answer is that there are careers or positions that are transferable and fairly easy to transition from. Again, it's not that software engineering or data analyst work is better or worse. It's that they're probably a little easier to get into, and then you can transition in. Mm-hmm.
The thing I'll add too is that, again, I think especially for entry level positions, we probably have to adjust our salary expectations. I had friends who came out of code school a couple of years ago, and I think within maybe a year or two, they were making $200K with bonuses, like insane boost in wages just going through code school. I think what's going to happen now is that the job market is going to be tighter, and people will have to take the job they can get to get experience. But then once the economy recovers, there will be new opportunities from there, basically. And so adjust those experiences, but adjust those expectations, but build experience during a downturn. And then when things turn around, you'll be the senior person who can command really good wages.
I have sort of a question / statement. Yeah. So obviously something really relevant in landing data science work is your portfolio. I would imagine that people trying to land data engineering roles, they're really not spending as much time on their portfolio because it's like, oh, I have to build these systems out. Yeah. And I would imagine, again, correct me if I'm wrong, that actually building things would really set you apart, because not a lot of people want to do that and create these instances.
Jump in on that one. Exactly it. So one of the things that we look for when bringing people on, even if they haven't got much experience, look at their Git repository. Look at what they've done. Ask them to talk through the scenario. And even if the code's not best, even if they may not have the best most performant code, but it's the approach they've taken to go and solve that. And if they can explain it, they've understood the business problem. And I think the thing mentioned earlier about data analysts versus engineers, analysts, you're going to be closer to the business challenge. You actually know why you're doing it. Engineers, you can do, depending on what part of that engineering process you're on, or if you're just on the ingest, you may not. But if you're doing the data model, you do. So a variety of getting that variety of experiences from either a data analyst, a data engineer, and then moving on maybe to a data scientist. Find out what you enjoy doing most. Maybe you're not a hardcore coder and you don't like doing that, but you like solving the business problems. So there's a place for everyone.
Well, I remember who was this VC, Bryce Roberts. He lives around here. He had a good quote on this podcast interview I listened to him with, and he said something like, people are asking, "Oh, why did you move from the Bay Area to Salt Lake City?" And he's like, "I got kind of tired of just wearing somebody else's blue shirt and khakis." And I think that's a kind of a profound statement in a way, because I think there's a lot of advice that people offer you, and at the end of the day, you really do need to figure out what do you think is best for your career, not for somebody else's version of your career, right? I mean, all of us, I think, have opinions about how you should enter whatever facet of a data job you want, but at the end of the day, I think all of us have gotten to where we are because we've actually done something pretty, I would say, unorthodox or interesting. I don't think anyone here has taken the traditional approach, Chris, Ken. I mean, so Matt, So.
Well, I think that opens up a whole nother can of worms in terms of like what you can do and what opportunities you might have in a down economy. So a lot of people suggest that you have a lot more stability if you work for one of these big companies, you have a retirement, you have health insurance, all these things. I've actually always viewed it in the complete opposite way. So I've always been fascinated with entrepreneurship, with creating things outside of my work, because I felt like I had complete control over that. And if I have complete control over it, to me, that means I'm actually de-risking it. If I'm working for a large corporation, they can fire me almost at any time, depending on the contract I signed. So, I'm not saying that everyone has to do something entrepreneurial. It's not for everyone. But at the same time, there's ways to diversify your income, diversify the ways that you survive outside of just one paycheck or one place that you're getting everything from. So I highly recommend, if people are interested in doing outside consulting, like start doing that as quick as you can, so you can build a portfolio or a resume, so you can get more of those gigs, right? Like, to me, that is the ultimate freedom, is saying, oh, I can find work if I need it. I can make money if I need it. I know how to do that. I've cultivated that skill. So, there's obviously way more ways to do that than consulting. And I think we've all experienced quite a few different ones, but diversification on that front also can hedge you in very incredible ways.
Well, I think I was writing about this morning in my journal, as thinking more, just reflecting on, we were hanging out all yesterday, and I was like, okay, so it's the power of personal brands, right? It's like, Ken and I were at dinner last night, and on the way out, somebody like accosted, was like, "Oh my God, you're Ken Jee. I love your content." I thought that was really cool.
Shout out to Jared.
Yeah, shout out to Jared if he's watching this over at the Red Iguana.
He was very nice.
He was very nice. Yeah, accosted is the wrong word. Very pleasantly approached Ken and politely said hello. But I thought that was cool in the sense where, I think you've done a fantastic job at building, your brand, right? And everyone here's done a great job at building their brands as well. And it's, but that's the one thing too, in a downturn, that, your brand and your reputation is kind of all you have, and so I would encourage people to really focus on building out, your niche, whatever you are, whatever you represent, and not be scared of that. I think you really do need to stake a claim as to who you are in this universe, and make that known to people, and do a really good job with it. At the end of the day, that's your biggest asset, is your reputation. At the end of the day, that's kind of all you have. And you got to remember too, it's as Buffett says, it takes 20 years to build a reputation, 5 minutes to destroy it. And you got to be mindful of your actions every day, of how you treat your reputation. But to me, that's what's going to carry you through a downturn, and in the inevitable upturn. These things are just, you got to remember, the downturns and upturns. It's all the same thing. It's just part of a pendulum. Things go up, and down, and things go left and to the right. It's just how it is, and it's how it always has been, and it's how it always will be. Because at the end of the day, downturns are very much a reflection of just human psychology. And that, as much as people want to try and mathify it away and try and predict these downturns when they're going to happen, here we are again.
I think the downturns create opportunities as well, because they'll either people like either review how they're doing things, maybe look for more innovation. Maybe it's a time for you to brush up on some skills, or maybe do a career, change career. Maybe you're moving to analyst, you want to move into more of an engineer role. You just maybe take a pay cut for a bit, just to take another role to go and get those skills, and then right out the turn, you can benefit from it.
It's funny, on my podcast, I've interviewed quite a few people that they've said that in the beginning of COVID, they got laid off, and it was one of the best things that happened to them. They were able to upskill. They had time to really evaluate what they wanted to do and where their career and the directions of the companies are going. Again, I don't think people losing a lot of money and this type of thing is in any way a good thing, but if you're framing it as an opportunity to turn a page or start on the next chapter, that's a pretty powerful sentiment. Sometimes you're forced to do that, and if you can look at it like an opportunity rather than something bad, that's again unbelievably powerful.
It's unbelievable, and it also reflects definitely the difference between a growth and fixed mindset, which is, again, it's much easier said than done. I mean, if you're focused on surviving and trying not to lose your house, and then you're going to be homeless and living off of cat food, that's a totally different situation than at that point you're I just need to you get dog food instead of upgrade a bit, but it's all relative to kind of where you were. On that note too, I would say it's a good opportunity. You should prepare yourself for opportunity and look at this as an opportunity. But how you do that is really, it's the steps you take during the upcycle that really, I think, gives you the runway to succeed in a downturn. That means not being dumb with money. That means not YOLOing your money into Luna coin or something, right? And then oh, did that happen to you, Chris? Ken's sitting here so no, I'm kidding. But the steps you take, when things are good, is very much dictates the types of decisions that you're able to make when things are a bit rough. So that's always something I want to keep in mind as well. What are you gonna say, Chris?
Just pointing that the COVID thing being a good thing. So I was CTO of a travel company right before COVID, and Leap was a side task. It made me focus and go 100% on it. And if it wasn't for that, I'd still be doing a CTO role, working out desk plans and HR disputes. So I'm quite.
That's really, you got to follow your passion, Chris.
My passion is HR disputes and where people sit in their office. That was a highlight of it. But no, and go back to what your passion is, and if it is, do what you like doing. And I work with data because I love data, and even if I wasn't being paid for it, I still do it. Well, I'm not being paid for this. I'm still doing it. So. Well, not yet.
Well, you're not getting paid.
You get paid. I need to renegotiate.
Sponsorships, yeah.
Actually, Rabbit has a question here. Rabbit, what's up? What time is it there right now? So anyway, good to see you, Rabbit. He wants to know, kind of zooming out, or 2 to 3 years from now, what do you think the top 3 data roles are in data? So.
Oh, that's interesting, because Joe, you and I, well, I mean, data modeling. Actually, we've talked about that quite a bit today. But Joe, you and I have talked about how maybe the nature of the data engineering role actually changes. That's an interesting question.
Well, I mean, because there's variations, there's the evolutions of things, of titles. Like data science, I think is going to change a lot. Data engineering is going to change. We'll all change. I'm curious. I think okay. So if you take a linear extrapolation from where we are to 3 years from now, engineering will obviously be more important. I'm saying this, obviously be more important. You can make an argument that ML engineering, ML ops is going to be more important. But there's a bit of nuance to this answer too, where I think there's increasing abstraction and tooling and in practices, which I think are going to lead to maybe some different types of roles and maybe different titles even. So, if you're if a lot of the tooling that you have is SaaS and all that, then there's not a lot of engineering for you to do. So that gives you time to focus on other stuff. higher level data management tasks and so forth. So I'm very curious what other people think about this. I know Matt and I have our own thesis of the world, but Ken, what do you think?
So I think in the short term, we have to differentiate like large tech companies from all the other tech companies, right? What's going to be valuable in these large tech companies is going to be very different than almost every company that's trying to adopt a good data infrastructure and data science and whatever it might be. So in the short term, I think engineering and infrastructure are going to be the most important things in companies that are not like cutting edge, bleeding tech. In cutting edge technology, they've spent so much time building out their own infrastructure. They have a lot of custom systems for these things. And they're probably going to be focused more on research and advancing AI and those types of things, right? In the future, after 2-3 years, probably closer to 5-10 years, I think we're going to see another resurgence of just like exploratory data science techniques because more people will have good infrastructure, high quality data to be able to do these things on. I would usually set, I think like the threshold would maybe be 5 to 10 years, which would be 2 to 3 years. I don't think too much will change aside from us seeing like more growth in data engineering.
I think one thing that Joe and I anticipate, well, first let me talk about the current state of data typically. So right now, what typically happens between an application team and a data engineering team is that if the application team is cross-functional, then they have like a database specialist at least, or maybe there's a database like service center in the company that helps these teams set up tables, transactional schemas and such, normalization, all the things that you need to run an application. And then that data flows kind of, across, almost over a wall, call it a waterfall or something. And then the data engineering team picks it up and tries to do something with it. And I think in the future, with abstraction and improvements in tooling, what we're going to see is that the data engineer will basically be integrated more into that application team, and they're going to handle the transactional data, and they'll also handle the downstreaming of it into, it could be real time, it could be batch, but they're going to handle the analytics side of things, and they'll also help to make sure that that schema that the application team designs supports analytics applications as well, which is something that tends to be very awkward still right now, just because of that division of labor. Will they still be called the data engineer, or will it be called something else? That's not clear to me, but I think the role itself changes a lot in the next 5 to 10
that's something
years.
we actually call it in the book. It's kind of ironic. We wrote the fundamentals of data engineering, and in the last chapter we wrote the title itself actually stands a chance of disappearing because that's how it is in any career, and in data as well. I think what we've seen is an overarching sort of accumulation of different roles into titles like data scientist, for example, that encompasses a lot of different jobs actually. Same with data engineer, and it's entirely possible that these things get splintered off, and I'm perfectly fine with that. We'll just write the fundamentals of whatever type of data engineering, I guess, right? So but it's just like the thing in tech you got to realize is there's nothing static about it. It always changes. That's if tech is a fast moving field. That's why we're in this, I guess, or maybe I don't know. So what are you gonna say?
I think touching on the data modeling thing, I think that's it was an old art that's died a bit, and I think I think coming back, and I think there needs to be more of a focus on it to get the best value of it. I mean, regulatory drives it, removing duplication, removing multiple versions of the same truth, all those things. Data modeling will help solve. I think another thought I had is a role linked to the FinOps stuff and is value ops. So making sure what you're doing, not just from a cost perspective from the infrastructure, but what you're doing, what you're building. Are you building a reusable asset? Can it be used for other things? So I think there's going to be a big focus on making sure you're getting I use the term best bang for your buck. Making sure that you're getting what you're working on, what you're building is right for what you're doing. So I think there's a couple of other, and I think the last one I was just thinking of is, and we talked about this, is that machine learning or data science was always downstream, right at the end of the whole path, and it wasn't business critical or part of your DR, and it wasn't part. Normally put a side team on the side. It wasn't part of your main data or your development engineering team. I think those roles will be coming back and sitting more in there for doing real time decisioning as part of the application. Yep. For example, the comment that Lauren made about some observation of DBT recently and how it's being used for SOX compliance or financial information. Having that done as part of your core software engineering team and done it in a much more supportable way, I think is where some be more of an increase in people doing those sort of roles.
Well, that thought is interesting. I mean, I wonder if we combine this idea of FinOps and sort of pushing some of the financial stuff more into software engineering teams. Do we think that's in the future? Obviously, that's not going to be high enough quality for like financial reporting officially, but like, is there more of a financial data tracking responsibility that goes right into software teams to talk about attribution and value you're generating and associating that with costs? And maybe the same thing happens on the data science side, because data science is a big spender. I mean, there's lots of value there, but you have to like justify the value by linking it to something. I don't know.
I'm personally very interested into how that works. I mean, I think it's probably like a 50-50 split. I could be wrong. Please someone correct me, between data teams being owned, like data science teams specifically being owned by engineering or being owned by some sort of business. And I think that for a lot of data scientists, it's a shock to your system to go work for an engineering team. There's a lot of things that are done differently. Like the project management is very different. And I think it can absolutely work. A lot of the like normal project management techniques that are used for software engineering, but there is absolutely friction and some things that don't work in a similar fashion. And so as an organization, like, do you have to choose where those data scientists sit and what are the implications of those choices? That's something that I personally have absolutely no good answer for, but I think that that's going to be front of mind for a lot of leadership, especially in the next couple of years.
For sure. Kind of switching gears a bit. Before we started, we were talking about portfolios and other things that. Let's talk about the people who are just getting into data right now. The other day, I was talking to a friend. She's looking to switch careers, get into. She wants to be an analyst. She's like, so how do I do this, right? I want to be an analyst. I'm coming from a career where I crunch numbers all day. It's not really called analytics, maybe, but let's say they're not even crunching numbers. You just want to be getting into analytics. I mean, it was hard enough, I would say, before a downturn, and now I suppose there's just a lot of extra pressure. What would you advise somebody trying to, get into the field right now?
I think one thing I was thinking about with your comments about portfolios, Ken, is that we need to broaden what we think of as a portfolio. So of course, you've got the code aspect. You've got like, here's some actual, model results that I can show. And maybe it's things like video as part of your portfolio. So in other words, yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, definitely. And it ties in with this whole entrepreneurial notion. You don't necessarily have to be out like monetizing things to be an entrepreneur in some sense. You can say, all right, I'm, just want to get into data engineering. So today I'm going to stand up, set up Apache Kafka, set up some data sources, set up some downstream processing with Apache Flink. And how do you document that? Well, create code, configuration, all those kinds of documents, but create YouTube videos that shows the process and actually explains it to other people, because that shows someone very concretely, hey, this person has done this project. And not only that, but they took the time to explain it to someone else, so that if I'm another data scientist that wants to learn about Kafka and Flink, I can then go look up that video and learn something from it. And a potential employer can look at that and say, oh, this person really took some initiative and like figured this project out.
I agree 100%. I think that you showcase a unique set of skills by video is an interesting medium, right? Through a video, I can show how clearly I can communicate verbally, which is something that people have a difficulty doing it until you get to the interview process. You also get familiarity, like an interviewer who sees you produce a video, they know how you talk. They've seen your face. You have a distinct cognitive advantage because they recognize you. And that's a huge part of the interview process in most companies still. I will say blogs or other mediums also show really incredible things. I mean, if we think about how we communicate in the workplace still, it is mostly written. And if you can convey information clearly in a written format, I mean, via email, via Slack, via another platform that is owned by a large tech company that I don't like very much. Not the tech company, the specific product, but those are things to consider, that you're showing an immense diversification and a unique set of skills. I really believe that if we abstracted away all of the different all of our heuristic approaches to interviewing, we'd be a lot better off. And what I mean by that is we look at getting a job as the process of getting a job. We don't look at it like a problem to solve. And I think if I wanted a job in a specific industry, I think it helps to narrow things down. There's specific things that I could do to make me stand out from every other candidate. Like we're talking about a portfolio. Okay, I would have a portfolio that's really focused on a specific industry, right? If I wanted to work in like hydroelectric power or something very specific, I would have a project on that. If I wanted to narrow it down to maybe 2 industries, like let's say even if they're unrelated, like that and agriculture, which I guess are kind of related, I could have a couple projects on each, and there is some relationship between them. I would argue, or probably be willing to bet, that there are very few other candidates that have projects that are relevant to the specific work they're doing. And let's think of it from an employer perspective. If someone's already shown me that they can do work that's relevant to the field, it might even be that the work that they're doing, we could actually use that right now. They'd be hiring you for work you've already done that you can integrate, rather than work that you have to go on and do and they have to guess about. So there, in my mind, there is just approaching it like, okay, what would this person want from me in order to hire me is something that we rarely do, but can make all of the difference.
I think you just said there, which really resonated, was that focusing on a vertical. Anyone building a company out there, you can't go the shotgun approach and go for everything. So I suppose if you're looking for a role, you may have an industry you've got some historical experience in or have a passion in. If you use that one to focus on and target, so do some shows or do some collaboration, find some other people working in that industry, troll them, send some messages on them. Well, not troll them,
that's how we met.
Put some collaboration, give some feedback, give your views on it, and things can happen. You make some friends, make some share knowledge, and it can open doors. And by the way, Nesh, a big shout out for you. So I put in some comments.
Mike Nash.
No, Mike Nash as well. And Mike Nash as well as Nesh.
Nash. Yeah. Oh, hey, what's up?
I mean, yeah, linking back to this portfolio idea and targeting a specific industry, especially when I'm hiring an entry-level person, I'm not necessarily looking for someone who can completely do the job already. In fact, I assume even if they've been doing a similar job for 10 years, I'm still going to have to train them in things. But what I really want to see is initiative. Yes. I want to see that they're going out of their way. And passion.
You can't fake passion.
Yeah. You need interest, passion, aptitude, initiative. All of these things are important. And the nice thing about the portfolio is that you have an opportunity to present all of those things versus this very traditional resume that's very dry. And often it's very easy to lie on a resume. In other words, you can say I have 5 years of Java experience when really that just means that you did a Java project 5 years ago in school and that's all you've done. Whereas if I see the project and see that you're programming, I don't know, user-defined functions in Spark and Java, that's much more interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
I think what it all comes down to for me is, why do you create the portfolio to begin with? Mm-hmm. Right? Is the portfolio to show you have a base set of skills and to make you look exactly like everyone else? Or is the portfolio to differentiate you from other candidates? And if you're viewing it and saying, hey, my goal is to differentiate myself from other people applying for this job, you're going to have a heck of a lot more success, unless you're differentiating in a bad way. But I think we get the idea.
You can stand up for the wrong reason.
It's about the brand, right?
Be careful with social media, right? Things can go very, very wrong with social media. Obviously, be careful what you say. Don't be offensive.
Remember, sometimes that stuff doesn't get deleted. So be careful what you post, and may not to upset too many people at the same time, at least.
But I do think Ken has a good point, though. You kind of zig where other people zag, and because I see this a lot with I think boot camp and university projects where it's all, there's a certain sameness. Well, by definition, how do you stand out, right? If you have the same portfolio as everybody else in your graduating class, what makes you any different than the other, several dozen people that are along with you? And that's why I think you really do need to be brave and take a stand and do something that really does interest you. I mean, that's what's going to keep you going in your career anyway. It's not like because you have a portfolio, one, you're guaranteed a job, and two, you're going to like the work. I think you got to really figure out what do you like to do, and then go from there. That's at the end of the day, you got to play the long game with your career too. I understand getting your first job is tough. But if there's something you want to do, I mean, put in the time. And so.
Well, I also get this question like, oh, I don't know what to do. I don't know what I want to do. I mean, to me, that's really interesting because projects are the way, and building out your portfolio is the way you figure out what you want to do, right? That's how you get your hands dirty with specific data within a specific domain with specific tools, and you can easily, guide yourself towards what you're interested in. And then eventually you should be doing the work that you do the job that you want to have before you actually land it.
Yeah.
Right. And those two things bleed perfectly together because you have part of the discovery from actually pursuing the projects, and then eventually the portfolio that you build from it that propels you towards the job that you want.
I think about athletes though, right? Like, being an athlete is like possibly when you look at it from a an outcome perspective, it's like that's possibly the dumbest career path you could think of. It's like low probability you're going to succeed. Your body's going to get torn apart. Are you getting warm in here? Okay. And all that kind of stuff. But why is it that people, want to pursue being an athlete? It's because you're driven by something different. And so, I think that level of enthusiasm, hopefully you can carry that into your career. I know it's sort of a privileged comment in a sense where it's, we're sitting here with a lot of experience and stuff. But if you're new, it's figure out what you like to do. You might find out you actually hate data and want to do something else. That's entirely possible too. Like I know people that have left the tech and data field, I know countless people that have done that, and they're perfectly happy doing whatever they're doing now, which has nothing at all related to tech and data. I know one guy who brilliant engineer and whatnot. He's like, I'm just going to go make furniture for a while. Like, I'm just kind of tired of this. Like, at least it makes you happy.
Did he code it all how to do it though? It's like program the
it's all
machinery.
3D printed.
Yeah.
No, I think he does it with his just by hand. That's where it got to. So
and something you mentioned there about athletes and what makes a good athlete. And I think I watched a guy did a presentation about what makes a high performing team or what makes a high performing athlete, and it's basically doing the same thing over and over and over again. And I think he was pointing out that most of the fastest runners came from Jamaica. And is it something about Jamaica? No, it was because there wasn't much else to do, but they were just going to this running thing, and it was day in, day out. They did the same thing. Most of the best footballers were from Brazil, probably from areas of poverty. All they did was kick a ball every day. He's saying, I think it takes 10 years of doing something repetitively to become the best of it. But you don't carry on doing that long if you don't like doing it. So to your point, if you start actually doing it and you think it's not for me, or then you can actually optimize it, change it and maybe it's a slightly different field. Maybe it's more on the data science. Maybe it's on more data prep. Maybe it's on the more data modeling. Find out what makes you tick and what makes you happy. Focus on that.
I'm sure Ken could talk all day about athletic performance. That's kind of what you do, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, so the really interesting thing there. So the book I believe you're probably referencing is called The Sports Gene.
That's it.
And it talks about how, are there genetic differences that allow improved performance in sports? And a lot of it is nature, not necessarily nurture. There are some nurture related things like in, I think it's Ethiopia, where a lot of the best runners come from. The bone structure in their legs is thinner, so there's less drag. But it's meaningful, but not. But the idea that hard work and dedication to something because you have passion is unbelievably important. I will also say, though, there's a book that sort of refutes that book, and it talks about how people who start as generalists end up being significantly more successful.
Was that Range?
Range.
That was
correct,
actually
yes.
written by the same author, wasn't it?
Might have been.
Dave Epstein. Yeah.
But
anyway.
I really like the idea of that. I think that folds perfectly into the conversation we're having about portfolios, is that you can experiment, you can explore, and you learn these new skill sets. And through that exploration process, you bring more skills to whatever you decide to eventually dedicate to. So there's no contradiction here. Like if you're exploring and you have the stuff and then you develop passion and target it, you eventually have as much success as possible. So I just wanted to make sure I mentioned part of that is the exploration followed by the dedication. And it's
that generalist bit, getting that first.
Well, I mean, having a curious mind, I think, is a really good trait in people. And I think that's kind of what helps you succeed in a field like data and tech, where things are changing super quick, if you can have, a natural curiosity about you to keep learning stuff. Continuous learning, I would say, if you're going to center on one trait that's going to keep you going in this industry, 100% continuous learning. If you don't like to learn new stuff, you're going to kind of suck after a while. And by after a while, I mean probably after a couple of years. So,
oh yeah, very, very quickly. And let me ask this question too, Joe, to follow up on what you were saying earlier. You mentioned the long game. I mean, more broadly, aside from continuous learning, how do people prepare for the long game in a field that's changing so quickly? I mean, the rules of English football have been the same for a long, long time. The rules of running have been the same for a long, long time. So how do you recruit? Yeah, but how do you prepare for like a field that's like, how do you prepare for the long game if you're getting into your career now, but that things are going to change dramatically in the next 5 years because they changed dramatically in the last,
I would say
this high probability.
The superficial changes occur quite frequently. And by that, I mean, new technologies, new frameworks, all those things. So you got to distinguish between what's an undercurrent, what's a fundamental versus what is, a bit more of a transient or superficial type of a thing. Knowing the difference between those two things, I would say alone will set you apart from 99% of people. Most people want to focus on shiny objects. Shiny objects are not that interesting. Shiny objects will maybe help you accomplish a task, but I would argue learn the fundamentals. So if it's data science, like dig into the fundamentals of math and kind of how does machine learning really work? For example, how do I do visualizations? Like what are sort of the things that haven't disappeared, over time? The Lindy effect is what a lot of this is called, right? Where if something's been around for a long time, the probability of it being around for much longer is very great. In engineering, for example, Bash, that's been around forever. The chance that Bash just suddenly disappears, I think, is pretty low. SQL is the same way. And so, but then there's underlying principles too. Computer science that has a lot of immutable concepts that I think you'd be well to understand. And so I would say investing in those things that, or I would say they appear boring. This helps you understand so much more once you have a grasp of the fundamentals. If you don't have a grasp of the fundamentals, you really do run the risk of short-sighting your growth in education over the long term.
So to sort of chase what Joe just said, I think fundamentals unbelievably important. There's another layer beyond that I think really is what separates success from like unbelievable success. And to me, that is the meta learning skill of picking up something quickly. So like, learning one individual new tool is not going to be very useful to you, right? Because that tool might go obsolete soon. And there are some tools that aren't going to go obsolete, right? Like some programming languages, it'll take a long time. But if I learn the fundamentals of a programming language like you described, I am pretty confident that in like 2 or 3 weeks, I can learn almost any programming language and be able to implement something in it just because I know how programming works. And I know how programming works from like experimenting with different languages and whatever it might be. And so that skill, me knowing that I can pick something up quickly and I can understand the infrastructure because I have that understanding of the fundamentals, is the thing that I think will carry anyone who focuses on that skill to the next level. And I wouldn't say guarantee them a career in the future, but to me, if enough of my work is just going on, it's like Googling stuff and going on Stack Overflow. If I just focus on like memorizing the different commands that I would use, I just, it wouldn't be worth my time versus like being able to consume this information so quickly. Mm-hmm. I will say also the other side of that, I think, is branding, right? Is that if people know me for a certain thing and I have credibility associated with me, I'll get asked to be a part of specific projects or whatever it might be for the foreseeable future. And I can leverage that previous skill to figure out how to do those projects once I get in.
That's good. That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, the skill of learning how to learn, it's a tough one because this is something that our educational system doesn't necessarily teach you.
It sucks.
I feel like you start learning it in graduate school, right? So when you're an undergrad, learning is mostly pretty linear. In other words, you take a math class and they stipulate, okay, on this day we're going to cover this, and this day we're going to cover this, and then you get to grad school and you have a research project and you read papers and you understand nothing, like okay, or you understand like a few sentences out of the whole paper, and then you have to figure out how to like tie all these threads together. You're kind of on your own in figuring out how to do that. I mean, hopefully you have some mentorship or something to provide you guidance to put these pieces together. And maybe that's, another important piece of advice for people learning how to learn is you do want mentorship. You do want people who will give you some guidance on the journey, who will give some pointers on the direction and how you're going to be able to assemble the bigger pieces, especially as you're starting out.
Let me ask you a show of hands here. Who has a graduate degree? Right. Okay.
How far are you going down? Degrees? Got any qualifications at school?
Yeah, but the whole, it's what I'm saying is it's interesting because, Chris and I, we don't, and but somehow, I think all of us, we're all peers, and I think what I think separates us from, or I think the commonality is, I would say, is more that we're all continuous learners. We're all just in learning things fast, and and all this stuff. It's I think that's the commonality here. We all none of us knew each other probably a few years ago, right? And like we all got here somehow. Actually, it's kind of strange. We're all hanging out. That's kind of a trip, but but we're in the data industry, right? And we've been in the industry for a long time, so.
We found out yet, have we? So must be doing something right. I think the thing about learning and for me, I think how I get to learn now is I don't get a chance to go and do some coding nowadays, and I do miss it. Going back down to the roots of it, but being able to work with the next generation of engineers or people in the team, I have the ideas still. I can do that, but I don't have the time to go and execute on them. But giving them the ideas, them going off and running it, not telling them exactly how to do it. I try that sometimes, that doesn't work. Giving them the problem and let them come back and tell you how they solved it. I learn as much from that as I probably would have done it myself. In fact, probably more, because it would have taken me longer to go and get some of those key skills to go and do some of the stuff. So they can summarize it for me, give you the context. I can actually use that knowledge myself then. So I think there's many ways of getting that knowledge. It doesn't have to be all doing it yourself. It's watching shows like this. It's working. It's
watching Ken's videos.
Yeah, watching Ken's videos. Not my videos. I haven't got any. But,
So at least for me, I think that there's a really important distinction around mentorship that we need to make. So mentorship is not someone telling you what to do. That completely defeats the purpose of what you were just describing. Mentorship is like a back and forth relationship where both people are adding value. You're learning from the person you're mentoring, and the person that you're mentoring is gaining additional insight. And it's guidance. It's not like do this, do this, do this. There's so much more freedom around like you're in control of it. I'm just giving you like feedback. It's like a little push. And I find that people also view mentorship as a very specific thing. It's I'm working with this one individual person, but I've always viewed mentorship as a very broad thing. Like I can watch a video of someone, I can read someone's book, and that to me is a form of mentorship. I'm getting their experience that they're passing down directly to me in a fairly like formalized or informal manner. And if we're viewing it that way, where mentorship is like maybe bumpers on a bowling alley rather than rather than a specific guide, you're going to be so much more successful, because there is absolutely no point in any of the data domain where you're going to have your hand held through the whole process and have success with that.
We learn by failures as well. So not until you make mistakes, you don't know, oh, that's not the way of doing it. But if someone else can teach you that and say, look, I did this wrong, I went that way, it didn't work. So I think it's really good that we've got a very good mentorship program internally at the moment. And when I started doing it myself, it's what do I teach them? And it's not. I think it's your experiences. It's not black and white. They need to make it their own. So you can give your experiences, and they can make it their own. It's not a monologue. It's not a monologue where you just talk to someone for half an hour and they go, right, okay, I'm done. Because that's not mentorship. That's just broadcasting and probably just thinking you're better than anyone else and just telling them, because that's not mentoring. That's mentoring.
Let me ask another question here too. How, as a young professional, so suppose you get your first job and you're like 2 years in, how do you deal with imposter syndrome? This is a very frequent topic in all kinds of discussions because it's a very real thing that people continue to go throughout their careers, I believe.
I mean, I have a lot of thoughts on this. I'll keep it kind of short. So I don't think imposter syndrome ever goes away. I just think it's something that you learn to understand and leverage in a positive way. So when I have imposter syndrome about a video I produce or work that I do, it's a safeguard to make sure I'm doing good work.
Yep.
Right? It makes me extra careful about the things that I put out into the world. Yeah, exactly. You know, I also think that imposter syndrome is something that you like acclimate to a little bit over time.
Yep.
And the way that you do that is by getting reps. So the more of a portfolio I build, the more stuff I put out, the more things that I have associated with me, you get to look at your own track record and you get to say, hey, I've done all these things. Like you prove to yourself over time that you're capable of doing that. And so, I mean, not to plug something of mine, but I started the 66 Days of Data Challenge a while ago. And that's where every day for 66 days, you learn something and you share it with a community, whether it's on Twitter or whatever it might be. But the beauty of that is not that like you're building it's not just that you're building the habit of learning data science, right? It's that you can look back after 66 days and see how much you've learned and how far you've come. And so to me, that like we're always thinking about what's next. We're always thinking about, oh, I don't have the skill, I don't have whatever it is.
Yeah.
But how often do we even now think about how far we've come and the things that we've learned?
You worry about where you are now, not how you got there, what you've done on that journey.
Exactly.
I think sometimes, I mean, recently with me, it's if you're working too hard all the time and you don't get to step back and go, look back and go, okay, yeah, I have done all these things, you know. So yeah, and I think that does help as well.
Imposter syndrome is interesting, you know, Matt, because I think when we set out to write the book, you know, I think we thought we understood data engineering, and then we started writing about it, and we're just like, holy crap, like this is going to be a long slog to get this thing done. But what it uncovered for me was, you know, even though you think you know, even though you may consider yourself an expert, you should always approach each day with a beginner's mind, you know, and I feel like that was, you know, writing the book was single-handedly the best experience I went through because, you know, it did force you to reevaluate all your assumptions about your knowledge, you know, and especially like the book we wrote where there's not really, nobody's ever written something like that, where you kind of had to figure out the entire space and, you know, and summarize and also a lot of new ideas too. I mean, that stretched thinking in ways that I don't think it just wouldn't have happened if we hadn't written it. But, you know, I knew I grew a ton in the process. Like, I feel like if I look back now, you know, as Ken was saying, the progression you've made over the years, it's like, this is, it's really cool to see, you know, and I think that's, you know, and Chris can attest, he helped review it. I mean,
very good book, very good.
Oh, thanks. Well, I'll Venmo you $10 later.
So the answer is just to write a book, and then you can say you literally wrote the book on XYZ.
Yeah, you can do that, and
But the point is, you can write a blog post, right? And going back to your
That's
66 days of data, one of the best ways for a junior person, even if they're an undergraduate or grad student, not even working yet, to become the expert in something is just to go talk to a meetup coordinator and say, hey, I want to give a talk on this topic, or what's something I can give a talk on. And if it's new, the only experts are the people working in the open source project. And so in that group, you're probably going to be the expert and you can show off your knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, I have a friend who wrote a book on Streamlit when it was coming out, and he became one of the authorities on Streamlit. He eventually got a job at Streamlit.
That's cool.
Right. It's one of these things where, you know, if you really invest your time on learning a new tool that you deem to be very valuable, it can take you really far.
Oh, yeah.
You can become and you know.
You can become a data engineer now.
What's that?
You can become a data engineer now. You've written the book.
I guess I'll have to go apply for some jobs.
Apply for some jobs.
I'll give you one,
Thanks, Chris.
You can start the mentorship program on Monday.
That's awesome.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an opportunity. One of the cool things about the cloud is that, you know, again, 15 years ago, if you wanted to learn about the latest Oracle release, how on earth were you going to get your hands on that? You had to wait for the bits to come out, and then you'd have to be at a company. And now, every time there's a new announcement, like whether it's AWS or GCP or whatever, you can pretty much spin that up. Even when it's a pre-release, you can often just apply and get access, and you can try it out, and you can become the expert, present a YouTube video.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I've just seen Andy's probably totally agree with that as well. Stay humble regardless of your experience. And you do that very well, Andy. Great guy.
He's humble.
Yeah.
I don't even know him, but
He's one of our guys, one of our rock stars.
right on. Cool. Looks like we're coming up on time here. But thanks to the audience, a ton of good interactions. Thanks everybody for showing up. It's
this
really
was
cool,
fun.
like
Yeah.
having everybody's,
Thanks for having us.
you know, in Salt Lake.
Vegas. It was horrible there. Horrible Vegas. And
Yeah,
I'm so glad to be here now, honestly.
Oh yeah, Salt Lake's way better than Vegas.
I need it, actually. You need it. This is much for the doctor order.
If you're going back though, Chris is on sort of a national tour in the US right now.
Yes, it's the USA Data.
Do you want to plug what you're up to? Like what is Leading Edge IT? What do you guys do?
So yeah, we're data engineering, data strategy specialists, mainly in the UK. But we had to come over here because we won an award at the Thought Spot.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Emerging Partner of the Year. But because I was over here, I thought I had to stay here long enough to go to the Snowflake Summit, which is in June. So I thought I had to find some gaps.
You got some time between that. So
yeah, I'm feeling it. Don't worry. Some in Salt Lake City, some in New York, some in
other places. Yeah. Yeah, it's awesome. People want to learn more about Leading Edge. How would they do it?
Visit our website, www.leit-data.com, or check me out on LinkedIn. You'll hopefully find some good content there. I want to get some time, get some more stuff out soon.
Nice. Well, Ken G, for the two people on the planet who don't know who you are, how would they find out more about you? What are you up to these days? Actually, I was asking you that. Like, what's new with you?
So I'm just finishing my world tour where I was in Arizona, Austin, Arkansas, Boston, New York, North Carolina, and now Salt Lake City.
Sick.
And I did some speaking on that trip. I'm trying to settle back in and actually get to work on a couple of things I have in the pipeline. So
that's so cool.
I'm working on a course right now with my friend Jeff Lee, who's over at Spotify. I'm also just really trying to continue to expand my YouTube presence and the Ken's Nearest Neighbors podcast, where you can hear Joe's episode and quite a few other people's episodes as well. So
it's fun.
Yeah, just it's really awesome to be here. I met so many people. I think it's over like 13 or 14 people that I've had on the podcast or that I've known digitally over the past. On your trip? Yeah, since I've been on my trip. And yeah.
It's great. You meet them on these shows or these chats, and then you catch up to you face to face, and you feel like you've already met them. Yeah, so you've already got a.
Yeah, we met Chris actually. So we were doing a Friday show, and Chris was I think trolling us in the saying something. Or you saying something. Yeah.
You just didn't answer my questions.
He's persistent, and then I was like, then it got to the point in the comments. I was like, well. I mean, it's easier for me just to bring this guy on than I think. And I take a big gamble on that because I'm like, cool, live streaming with this guy, Chris Tabb. I have no idea who he is. I'm like,
they didn't know how drunk I was either at the time.
No, it was a Seattle data guy was doing the show with me. Yeah,
I'm seeing him tomorrow. I'm going to see him on. I'm seeing on Monday.
Yeah, that's such a.
I think he's on. He's commenting as well.
Yeah, he might still be watching. I know he's commenting earlier. What's up, Ben?
See you Monday, Ben.
But. Yeah, I think what's really cool about the data community is, and it's small, and there were a lot of awesome people, Kristen Kerr, Mike Nash, Ravit, endless people commenting here, and it's cool because we all know each other, and that's pretty awesome. So and Salt Lake, I think there's a surprising number of data people here, which is pretty interesting. So.
It's become an interesting mini tech community, and especially during COVID, a lot of our friends moved here from like New York and the Bay Area. We'll see if maybe they'll move back now. It's not super clear, but there's definitely a sense of community here, and it is a place where you can learn about data. So
it's awesome.
I'm going to give our shameless pitch, Joe, about the book. That's what we've been up to lately for the last year or so. It's almost killed us, but I'm going to be working on copy edits all weekend. I think Joe will too. And, it's supposed to come out maybe in August.
Yeah. So we'll get you a signed copy.
We'll come out and visit you this time.
But so you can pre-order it on Amazon. You can go check it out right now on O'Reilly.com. It's a pre-release, but it's I think it's good. I don't know. Chris read it, and
I think it's good. Yeah. I've actually printed off the Word document version. I have to pay for it. So
okay. Chris is also really cheap. So, but
he still uses a printer.
That's gross. Awesome.
In this market, that's probably more expensive.
Cutting trees and waste of it.
Yeah, and Colleen says you can pre-order the book right here. Just follow that at Amazon Fundamentals Data. But yeah, thanks for coming out, guys. We'll have to do this again sometime. Yeah, and for people, I know Harpreet Sahota, he was in the chat earlier. Show up to Artists of Data Science. He does a Friday show. I think that's super valuable. I think that's where we met actually. Yeah. I was like, oh, that's Ken G sitting there. That's cool. He's like, oh, that's a guy that looks like my cousin. Or so,
But yeah, let's look forward. Maybe we'll have an International Data Squad London edition one of these days.
Or Hawaii edition would be
Hawaii
cool too. Yeah,
edition,
for sure.
I'm just gonna get back to London one day.
Yeah, one day.
All right. Cool. All right. Thanks. Oh, and by the way, Monday morning data chat. Tune in for that. We got Chad Sanderson showing up. Potentially another special guest. So stay tuned. But Chad, he's writing some really cool, posts. I think he's just been spot on with a lot of his ideas for data stacks, data engineering. So it's going to be a real treat to talk to him. So anyway, have a good weekend, everybody. See you soon. Bye-bye.